Hi everyone, welcome to another episode of Shades of Black. I am your co-host Neralan.
And I'm Miriam, and today we're going to be having a conversation with a guest speaker who's with us today virtually, Jade.
Welcome to a new podcast, Shades of Black. I am your co host, Neralan, the founder of Consciously Black, a community platform where I gather Black individuals in Canada to discuss their Black experiences and revive Black pride.
And I'm Miriam, a registered psychotherapist and founder of Thoughtful Therapist, a mental health platform aimed to empower marginalized communities. And together we have created Shades of Black, a bi-weekly podcast emerging from both our studies where we shed light on the different experiences encountered within our Black communities and the mental health aspects that exist within those experiences.
Join our new community space where we discuss our challenges, our successes, our joy, our pain, and our Blackness. Follow us on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and all other platforms to tune into our bi-weekly episodes. We cannot wait to converse with you.
We wanted to have a conversation today about the intersection, bring in an intersectional approach to women's reproductive health, seeing what we've been encountering with the news over the last few days within the states, having their the Roe versus Wade turnover within the Supreme Court. So we wanted to just address a bit of that conversation and what that might look like and the impacts that might bring within women and marginalized women, especially women of color. So we'll just dive into this conversation today. Hi, Jade.
Hi.
Please start introducing yourself. We're good. Thank you. So you can start by with your name. Sorry. With your name, ethnic background, education, professional background, all that stuff.
Okay, so hi, my name is Jade. I'm 24. I'm living, loving, and learning in Montreal. So a little bit about me, I guess, is by day, not too interesting of a job. I'm a data analyst. I work in crime severity stats. It's not really important, but by night, I'm very much so like a very big activist and advocate. I'm a board member of Planned Parenthood of Ottawa. I think I'm the youngest board member of Planned Parenthood of Ottawa, and I'm also a communications and advocacy officer for an NGO called Feminine Caribbean, which is a small, newly grassrooted NGO plotted in Trinidad and Tobago that helps doing like regional Caribbean work around like sexual reproductive health, around menstrual equity, gender justice, and stuff like that. So, ethnically, I am Afro Caribbean. My parents are from Jamaica and Trinidad. I am born and raised kind of in Canada, so I am definitely displanted in Canada. I used to live in Toronto, then I moved around a little bit. I lived in Ottawa, now I live in Montreal. So I'm definitely like a nomad like that. I like to travel. Educationally, I went to University of Ottawa. I completed my Bachelor of Honors in Geography and Women and Gender Studies. And after that, I got into my job with the government and then also Planned Parenthood Ottawa and Feminine. I've always been very much so an advocate. I've always been working in the realms of sexual reproductive health, gender justice. At U Ottawa, I used to be the resource or the coordinator for the Women's Resource Center. I did that for like 2 or 3 years. I really enjoyed that job, and I always love working in like fields of gender justice and sexual reproductive health. It's very fun personally, and it's definitely hits home. Yeah, and you can always find me in probably some kind of like protest, advocating for somebody, going into community events. I love that stuff. I love community, so yeah, it's a little bit about me.
That's
That's
great.
good. It feels like you have like a fully well-rounded life from
Oh,
professionalism to like activism.
I try to keep it balanced. I try to keep it a lot of play and fun, and then also have to work because I have to adults apparently. But that's the part of life.
Okay, so we can start with the first conversation, the first question. So Nero, if you wanna go.
Could you please explain what's the main difference or correlation between women reproduction health and women reproductive rights?
Yeah, so pretty much women's reproductive health has everything to do with their health. It has to do with their physical health, their mental health, but also like psychosocial health or like how society interacts with their health. That's a aspect of women's reproductive health. It has everything to do from things like your menstrual cycle, from post traumatic, sorry, it has everything to do from like your menstrual cycle to postpartum depression to even like what we learn in school about women's bodies and health and decisions we're allowed to make on our own bodies. So all of that technically is encompassed in health, in women's reproductive health. Any kind of like way we interact as a society with a woman's health. The other aspect of it is kind of tethered, like kind of like intercorrelated together, is women's reproductive rights. You can't have women's reproductive rights without women's reproductive health. So it's pretty much like an umbrella term. Women's reproductive health is associated with like multiple human rights and also women's rights. So like it has the right, like it deals with the rights to be free from torture and free from violence, the right to have life, the right to privacy, the right to give be able to have or reproduce. All those rights and ability to do things with your own body kind of like correlate reproductive health and reproductive rights. Another thing about reproductive rights is that like it's reproductive rights is all about our rights and our agency over our own body. It's like it's all about bodily autonomy. I don't know if you know what that means, but it's pretty much our right to govern our own body and make decisions over our own bodies. So that's how they kind of overlap. So rights is like the ability and the choices that you get to make over your own body, and health is actually the health aspects that are specific to women, to girls, to two-spirited folks, and everybody who falls under the umbrella term of like women. I can give you some examples of reproductive rights because sometimes it can get overlapped and we can get kind of confused on what it may be. So like an example of reproductive rights is the ability, the one thing that we're really hearing about a lot lately is the ability to terminate a pregnancy, or the ability to even become pregnant if you wanted to. There's also the right to get birth control without parental consent at the age of 16. That is actually a woman's reproductive right. There's also something that's less heard of is like women in prisons. They have the reproductive right now to not be sterilized or go under tubal ligation, because previously a lot of women who were in the carceral system were forced to be sterilized. So now it is a choice and a move with women's reproductive rights to allow these women not to choose to get sterilized and have the choice over their own body and autonomy.
Okay.
Does that clarify a bit?
Yeah.
It does. So I just have a question. So the rights are also how are the rights determined or
Creative?
created? Yeah.
Yeah, so that's actually a really good question. I like to see it as the rights are kind of like a solution to the issues that have been coming up historically and systemically with women. So like we've noticed that let's think of something. Like abortion. We've noticed that women are historically always had abortions. However, this has been banned, and this was actually like criminalized by our systems, and we recognize that women shouldn't, well, we used to recognize that women should not be told that they, one, shouldn't be able to terminate a pregnancy, shouldn't be forced to endure a pregnancy that they don't choose to have, and also just like having choices over your own body and what happens with it and what's going on with it. So yeah, so out of the ideology that women have autonomy, they can choose what they want to do, they don't always have to be mothers, they don't always have to reproduce. Especially that only came about when like women and gender diverse people started coming into like political spaces, obviously. But when we recognize that, we're like, okay, maybe we shouldn't force them. Maybe we should give them a right to protect them, that so that they're not forced upon to do these things. So they're not forced upon, forced by their partners to have children when they don't want to, or they're not like told that they have to have an incestuous baby or have a baby that they chose not to have happen or have, like that's when the rights come about. It's really not proactive, let's just say that. But as a lot of laws are, they're not proactive. So yeah, so a lot of the times it's like cause and effect.
Okay, that's good. So I guess that kind of touches into the second question that we had, but before we go into that, I just had a question. So you mentioned how historically abortions have been present in society. So
Yeah.
I feel like maybe some people might not know what abortions may have looked like back in the days. So can you touch a bit more on that, on like the history of abortion and what that
Yeah, of
could?
course. I'm definitely not an abortion advocate specialist,
Yeah.
so I'm not going to give you the whole history, dates, and everything. And also, I'm bad at history, so that's never going to happen. But definitely, abortions have been around since before we can even record it, or we even had like an idea of what abortion was. Sometimes they were practiced medicinally through like holistic medicines, like food, vegetables, not vegetables, sorry, herbs, things like that, medicinal medicine in more of traditional cultures. Um, Abortions were also, I think, a little bit later we're able to have like be able to utilize tools. So I know that ancient Egyptians had kind of like something that looks like trying to think that people understand, like tongs. Like tongs, and how now medically we have something that looks like tongs, something very similar to be able to scoop out the child and scoop out an abortion. And also remember, I also like to like make people remember that even though like the process of abortions and the way in which we utilize abortions now are a little different from the way they used to do it, it always used to happen. So sometimes you'd have to have an abortion, maybe for different reasons. Maybe because your body wasn't fully able to carry this child for medical reasons. Maybe the child had been stillbirth. Maybe it just couldn't happen. It just wasn't a favorable situation. There were always methods in place to get rid of a fetus or to have an abortion, because like women's health and women's reproductive health is nothing new. Like it didn't get invented in the last decade. It's been around forever. We've just been doing different things and different methods. And then also, we don't really hear about the ways in which abortion happens, mainly because of our society, way it's structured, the conversations we're allowed to have, what is seen as appropriate, and also just like abortions is very like a touchy topic. But abortions do happen all the time. I think don't hold me to the stat, and I will give you an actual stat. I think there's about 5 million unsafe abortions that happen every year. That means no matter if the law says you can have abortion or not, in the places where it's legal or not, there are going to be abortions, and they're over 5 million a year. 5 million abortions a year is
It's a lot.
unsafe. Abortions a year
It's a lot.
is maddening. So it's very common. And I think there is a lot of like historical relevance, especially with community of color and marginalized communities. Definitely have a very large history of these things. However, as we know, colonialism, capitalism has kind of like covered these things and made it really hard for us to kind of access this kind of knowledge. But it's definitely something that's not new.
That's very interesting.
Yeah. I appreciate
Yeah.
What's your comment? Sorry.
Yeah. Sorry. Oh, my
Mhm.
comment. I think that it's very interesting how, like, how you mentioned that abortion has always been there from times, especially that a lot of people probably will think that abortion is something fairly new, just because that religion has always um, control women, autonomy and reproductive health and rights, just because like they think that most of them say that women are meant to reproduce and have babies. So yeah, so I kind of like this your comment on that, because I feel like people would have think that the woman role is to have babies, and they just think that this is new. But also another comment, and it's also kind of a question, but it's more like, what are some, in your opinion, what are some issues that comes having men in high political places that are there to control women reproductive health?
That's a great question, actually. One, to answer the first part, yeah, like it's a bit like abortions historically have been here forever. Like if you were to look at the history, obviously the history does have a cutoff point. We don't know everything, but like the history there's like a plethora of things to learn, and it's not only like Western cultures. It's so many cultures that practice abortions, and still to this day practice abortions in different methods and different ways. And just like reproductive health is just a normal thing. I think we're now putting a label to it and saying this is what an abortion is, but I think it's been practiced forever. Also, to answer your second question, I think there could be a few issues having men in decision making spaces. But I would like to preface it by saying I don't think the problem is men being in these spaces at all. I think that the problem is representation. I think that there's not enough representation for the societies that we live in. I think that if we constantly have a small group of people representing the larger group of people that are very diverse, that have so much different differences, so have so much different experiences and lifestyles, we will never actually be able to be an equitable society or a fair society. So like, and I'll give you the example of Toronto. Toronto is 51% of a new immigrant population. However, in Toronto, only you cannot be a new immigrant or like even an immigrant at all and be a political player or political leader in that city. So imagine 50, they're all obligated to pay taxes. That 51% has to pay taxes, has to do everything they have to do as to be entitled as a Canadian citizen. However, these people are not making decisions, and most of the political parties in Toronto are led by white cis folk. So like if you have a whole half of your population is immigrants and people of color, and there's no immigrants or people of color representing, we're gonna have a problem there. And the same thing goes for women's rights. If we have like a whole slew of people representing and making decisions for women's rights, but none of these people, like rarely any of these people are women, rarely these people are gender diverse, rarely these people are parents, rarely these people even know anybody in their life who's had an abortion, are not of different religious backgrounds, or like there's just so lack of diversity. um you're gonna get like a decision or rights that don't apply rightly to the society that's representing. And I see that we always see this problem. We've been seeing this problem forever, and it's even more of a problem right now in the US because we're seeing Roe v. Wade overturned in a society that like Roe v. Wade was finally prospering and was finally getting the rights. If women were finally getting autonomy over their body and having like, we were just setting our foot, like in the ability to just like make decisions for ourselves. And then after like it's snatched into your feet. So having, and like abortions are so common. Like one thing, the reason that the Roe v. Wade overturn affects so much Canadians is because a large portion of Canadian women go to the US to get abortions. A very, very large portion, especially those across the borders, because it's so hard to get an abortion in Canada. It's such a long and lengthy process. It can take anywhere from 30 days, a month to 4 months. So like, and you're pregnant. You only have 9 months. So it's such a lengthy and strenuous process that some just travel the border because it was so much easier and they have the access to that. But now that overturned, think about the chaos, think about the backlog Canada has, think about how this is going to affect us. So I went off a little tangent there, but like I feel like having people making decisions for a society that it doesn't rightly represent is like the biggest problem. I don't mind men being there because at the end of the day, men do have a point to play in reproductive health and rights. They're not like away from it, like they are directly involved too. Even if you are not married to a woman or you don't know a woman or whatever the case may be, you are directly involved. So I feel like the problem is we don't have enough women. We don't have enough women of color. We don't have enough women who are disabled. We don't have enough trans folk. We don't have enough folk who are from Indigenous representation. We just are representing a very small fraction, and a very small fraction who doesn't have children often or who doesn't have to go through the process of giving birth to a child or taking care of that child long term, or the psychosociological effects of having a child. Like we can talk about abortion or like reproductive health from a very like men should not get involved, but it's also like it's so interdisciplinary. It's so much layers to it. It's like an onion. Like you keep peeling, there's still so many things to get into it. So I feel like number one problem is not that there's men in these places, but there's people who do not know how to represent the population. And like, I know I'm talking a little bit, but a nice example I like to give people for like understanding that is like there's something called social location, and it's like shows you where you fall in life. So it says, I'll give an example. I am a Black, lower middle class, queer woman, but I have an education. I can speak English. That's where I am at. That's how I stand, and I can compare myself to a richer, high mid class white cis man who is not queer, who didn't have like who's fully educated and may not have had any interaction with like a marginalized community such as myself or any like marginalized communities. he goes into political power, he does not know how to make decisions for myself or people who look like me or who act like me, because he's never interacted with these people, or he's never lived the experiences with these people. So what he thinks is a problem may rightly be a problem, but he doesn't see the actual other problems that are happening. Like, you know, you can't, if you're up here, you can't really see what's going on with the people at the bottom, but the people at the bottom can see the whole picture because they're the ones who are suffering the most, you know. That's why they say, like, if you help the least, then you're helping everybody. I don't know how the quote goes, but yeah.
Okay, so that goes kind of ties into another question. So, what are some of the effects of? Okay, so you discussed a bit how it affects Canadian women who tend to cross the border to have access to these services. So when we talk about marginalized communities, and mostly like in this context, when we're talking about Black women, what are some of the effects of having some of these rights taken away from them? And yeah.
Oh yeah, I think there's like, yeah, I think there's so many effects that we don't see, and I don't have all the answers to that, but there are so many layers that this affects. So like the first place I can see this is like these groups, these marginalized groups, specifically Black women, are already so underrepresented, so understudied, so under researched, and like there are already so many systemic problems that are happening within these communities. For example, like Black women have the highest rates of chronic illnesses and like the highest rates of breast cancer in the world. Like that is a fact, and especially in Canada. And but however, we're the most under researched group in medicine. You know, so there's gonna be a lot of little sticky things that are going to happen under the table. So like the fact that a lot of Black women Black women in Canada are not going to be able to access a lot of Black women in America are not going to be able to access proper abortions or safe abortions. Now that's going to affect them, because if they don't have proper access to contraceptives or safer sex supplies, that means if they're not choosing abstinence, they will be most likely reproducing. And then when they reproduce, that is not just going to another child, but or a child, that is also an economic effect, that is also a social effect, can like it's also a psychological effect. And I think that um I think a lot of the times Black women and girls do go through a lot of how do I say this? Give me a second, let me
No
string that
problem.
sentence.
Trauma.
No, I don't want to say trauma, but like it's like bitter, like we're already not equally
Yeah.
protected as everybody else, and I feel like it's just gonna like unlayer another layer of unprotectedness, if that's a word. Like I feel like it's just making it a little more unsafe. So just the ability to not access proper care. Like imagine if you get pregnant and you don't want to have a child. Like think about it. Like today, either one of us just get pregnant. I'm not capable to have a child right now. I don't have the economic funds. I don't have the social support. I don't have the knowledge. That's your whole life changes in the blink of an eye. Not only that is like family dynamics, and it's not as always great to say, but Black women do have a very uncomfortable and like horrible ish like relationship when it comes to like absent fathers and absent parental figures in their lives. So like that just replenishes itself. And then also, if you think about it, it can also force people into the foster care system whose parents cannot provide for them. So when more kids are in the foster care system, more kids are pushed into poverty. More kids are pushed into lifestyles that they cannot, like they'll have to deal with, because they don't have the proper support, not only emotional but financial. And it's like a domino effect, and it just keeps happening. Like as a it's very commonly known in the US, there's a lot of issues with incarceration of Black men. This is just like that. This is just like a different way to like impact the community in a negative way by rules. Like the first, it was drug rules and drug laws, and now it's abortion bans and body bans, and then it's what's next, you know. So I think it definitely does heavily impact Black women, and I can talk about this all day because there's just so many layers to it. Like if you just think about the inability to have an abortion or a safe abortion, one, you're allowing people to now access a dangerous like backdoor abortions. I don't know if you guys know what those are, like
Yeah.
abortions that are not supposed to be happening without medical care. So you'll have people going through that, and a lot of people die. a sad amount of people die from those kind of unsafe abortions yearly, and they're very common. Like, I don't know if you ever heard of like the a wire
Yeah, I was
hanger.
gonna say,
Like, you
yeah.
ever that joke? Even though it's like funny to a lot of the Black community, it's just like ha ha ha. It's not funny because that's what a lot of people had to do and still now are going to have to do, and have to put themselves through that. And it's like so much trauma from that, not only but on your body but on your mental state, because abortions are not easy. So having to do that and like force your body through that, and then in America, like no, not even just in America, in Canada and America, Black women have such hard times in like the labor market and actually being able to obtain and steady full time jobs. So imagine having that issue and then bringing a child onto that table, or bringing the inability to control your own reproductive health. It's just like a bunch of like little bit of little jabs or little pins and needles into somebody's back. What else? There was something else I was gonna say, but I think I
So
kind of forgot it.
I do have a question. So if
Yeah.
because I totally agree with what you're saying, but if I'm just being like the devil advocate for a bit, if because I do understand abortion has always been present like from generation, but if let's say abortion was not something that so present in our society, should we
Mm.
not should the answer not be, not me saying that abortion is not a good thing, but should the answer not be um teaching more of a healthy sexual life? Because having the
100%.
option of, I remember when like conversation about like having sex, but having unprotected sex is almost underrated. Like nobody actually really want to have the conversation, and even when they meet a person, they meet the partner, it's almost a conversation that actually tend to never happen.
Mhm.
So as much as removing this is a domino effect, it's almost like, could it not be, quotation, a good thing, in quotation again, um
Mm.
and that force men also to step up in the baby life, so kind of making recreate, like trying to create like more of a like father more present, because a father not
Mm.
present at home do affect like all those different things, drop out of school, etc., etc. So I don't know, I'm just kind of thinking that maybe other people that are pro life are seeing this as, listen, like, or the fact that abortion and everybody have that right, and everybody always thinking this as the first option
Mhm.
is kind
Mm.
of,
Like there should be something else
yeah,
instead of
and,
having to
and
rel
yeah,
to
because abortion is a lot on
on the
on a
body.
woman body, as
Mhm.
much
Mhm.
that it is helpful, it's a good tool to have,
Mm.
not tool, but it's a good
It's a tool. It's a
tool
resource.
system,
It's a resource.
resources.
Yeah.
It's a tool.
Yeah,
It's a
but
thing.
I do feel like many people say that having an abortion actually it's hard. I think a lot of
Mhm.
person like recovering from abortion is something we actually don't talk about,
Yeah.
like how hard it is to recover from abortion. Anyways,
Mhm.
it's just me
Yeah.
100%.
thinking about like, after, especially after all this conversation we've been hearing in the news, but sometimes I'm just like, okay, Lynn, what now? How do we move forward with knowing this is now the result until that they turn it again?
Mhm.
It's like, how do we approach a conversation with women, girls, boys, men out there that, hey, you better start using condoms, because if no, here's the consequences.
Mhm.
Again, it's not the easy
Conversation to have. But
conversation to have.
No. I love that question. Honestly, it's not a devil's advocate question. It's a very important question. So yes, I agree. I think I don't. I wouldn't say it's a good thing that abortion's gone, but I would say that it is a gateway for a new conversation to be had. Um, so recently, I with my organization Feminine Caribbean, we just had wrote a toolkit guide called Reimagining Sexual and Reproductive Health and Rights, and we did this for a rural community in Trinidad and Tobago for them to understand their sexual reproductive health and rights, what it is, how to have sex, how to have safe sex, all the things about abortions, everything, all that. And I love that you brought up that conversation because, like, yes, abortion is an option, but I think education is key. Education is the pinnacle point of everything. And I will never ever personally put the responsibility on the community or people to learn this, but I think that our society, those governments, all those people, those politicians, they have the power to write these curriculums on which kids are learning. I don't know about you, but I remember growing up in elementary school, that religious book they gave us for sex ed class. I don't know if you guys had the same thing. It's like a religion book. Like, it's garbage. Like, did
We
you
didn't
have that
have a
book?
religious book. We went to the same high school. But
No, but in
Elementary
elementary
school.
school, not high school. In
elementary
elementary
school,
school.
we honestly we didn't talk. I went to a Catholic school, so
Yeah.
this thing about
Me
like
too.
talking about sex was basically taboo.
We had talked about sex a bit, but it wasn't. It was more so like what parts are what. I think I don't know. It's very vague. I can't remember it
Exactly.
very
Yeah.
well, actually.
Okay. Yeah.
With anatomy, you're like, okay, these are breasts, these are our uterus, this is the ovary, this is that. But like, that's okay. We can Google that. That's easy information to find. But the conversations about, okay, honestly, do you know that like most people start having sex at the age of 13 and
Yeah.
14 and
Yeah.
15, like that
Mhm.
gap?
Yeah.
ev- when we're going to school and they're teaching us, they're not teaching 13, 14, and 15-year-olds how to have safer sex, where to get like how to use a condom, how to take it off, how to dispose of the condom, what do you do if it breaks, what do you do if you don't want to use a condom and you're allergic to latex, what kind of like birth control can you take, how do you even go to a doctor to get birth control, who even had like, where do you get free birth control, like can you go to the OBGYN without your parents, like all these questions are never discussed in school, these things that you should be being taught in school, because this is what affects if you're having an abortion or not.
Hundred
This
percent.
is like, if you know how to have safer sex, you will have safer sex. And I think there was a recent study done. I think that like 48% of students who were taught to use condoms and have safer sex versus those who are not were more likely to have like safer sex and wait to have sex. Like these people were taking longer because they understood. And most of the time, sex comes from curiosity, and people are just having sex so they don't know. They're just like, oh, I want to do it because I heard about it,
Mhm.
so I'm gonna do it. But if we teach people from the beginning, one, it's gonna like slow down the rates at which people or young folks are having sex and unsafe sex. But also, we're promoting safer sex, so kids and adults, because there's a lot of adults out here who do not know how to have
Hundred
safe
percent.
sex at all. So if we teach them young how to have safe sex, they will take those traits all the way to adulthood. And this is why we'll have lower rates of abortion. And additionally, with the education aspect, as much as we want to rant and rave about like, oh, people need to be safe, we don't talk about like, where do I get a birth control pill from? Like, if you didn't know, if your family had never been on birth control in their lives, and like you wouldn't know where to go to, how to go to the doctor and ask for your pill, or ask to get an IUD, or ask to what a vasectomy or a hysterectomy, all these questions you wouldn't know because you were never taught about them. So a lot of the people who are never taught about this, just like, I don't know, go free willy nilly into life, which is okay because we all do at some point. But mistakes are going to be made a lot of the times, and if there's no urgency to like help people or reprimand this, then we'll always have this problem. Like Canada isn't like saying, okay, we're gonna give everybody free birth control pills, or we're gonna educate young men on how to have safer sex and give out free condoms in schools. And they're not like urging for these things. What our society is not aching and to present this information to us, but they gave us like the food chart that we got in like in
Yeah.
elementary school
The
about how like we
the
Carbs, the
got
milk, the
colors. Yeah.
protein.
no, exactly, we got a million of those, but we never got any education on how to have safer sex when you start to have sex. Because like this is the question, and that's the reason people are having to go into situations where they're getting abortions. And also, we don't make it a culture, like, and especially with Black people, and like make it a culture where it is okay to have safe sex. Like I understand it's fun, like sex is fun, but like having, like I've noticed within my own like community, people enjoy having like non unsafe sex because it's like kind of like a culture thing. Like it's kind of
Mm,
culturally normalized, but it's not
yeah.
supposed to be
And there's a lot
normalized.
of
We
issues
shouldn't
that
be
come
urging you
with
to
it.
have safe
And
sex.
yeah,
Oh,
it is. I think this is a big issue, but also school and the lack of education on sex ed. But I think also the conversation about sex and the curiosity of young um young kids, it's kind of create a bit of shame, if I can put that word, because
mhm.
parents also have a big role into this, into having the conversation with the kids. And I think what's happening, especially like, because my household, I'm Haitian immigrant. My mom doesn't, until now, I'm like 26, and my mom will not have any conversation about like sex or even kiss. Like, or this idea of like me having, now I have a boyfriend and my mom knows I have a boyfriend, but for her, it was kind of like, ugh. And she was very uncomfortable with that. And my thing is, plus I was going to church and church was telling me how this is a sin, it's taboo, is all this. So it never create like a safe space for any kid to go to their parents, to the father, to a mother, and say, hey, can I just learn what is it exactly? I think that even when kid ask the parents about like, oh, how do I have a siblings, they have to lie
Yeah.
to the children instead of like having honest conversation, because kids are very smart, they learn. And I think that a lot of curiosity cause abortion too, because eventually if they're not practicing safe sex, the parents end up finding out, and the parents has a thing to either hush the situation down, either they rush to the clinic and have an abortion at a very young age, or sometimes they figure it out, sometimes it's like the cousin, the mom, or a grandmother that raised the kid. But I think there's the culture around like
Safe sex.
safe sex is,
Stigma on sex,
it's
like
weird,
in
it's
a
shaky, like
Yeah.
no, and definitely see as like a Afro Caribbean woman, and because I don't know, like in the Caribbean, like colonization hit hard, like like the idea of Catholicism, Christianity, like hit us so hard, and it's still to this day, like even though they know like it's bad, they'll still like to the very end, and I understand like it is your religion, it is your faith, and I'm not gonna knock that, but like so much so that like we don't even talk to our own kids about sex. But then after, like, how do you expect your kids not to come home with a child or like get pregnant if we're never having
I
these
have a
conversations?
comment question. I don't know. The thought is just coming to me. So however it shows up,
Yeah.
let it show up. So we talked about how in Caribbean culture it's very hushed, but a lot of the times Caribbean the families have the biggest number of like siblings, and like just the other day I was at a barbecue, and then my a family friend was telling us how his dad had like 50 kids, and I was like, 50 kids, like what?
50.
Like yeah, and then like they're older too, right? So I'm trying to figure out like
Damn.
what's the age gap between the oldest and the youngest. And so my question or thought is like, how much importance do we need to also put in on having safer sex education for men and for young boys, because I feel like a lot of the pressure comes also for on girls and on women,
Yeah.
but at the end of the day, like, we just receive whatever is given. You know what I mean?
That's it.
So I feel like it
But
just needs to be talked about. I don't
also,
know.
I just want to add to just a comment.
Yeah.
I feel that the richer they are, the higher they are in the social, like the social rank, the more smarter they are into the number of kids they have. Like, and they don't be out here having a lot of kids left and right. I mean, we can see Hollywood a lot of time, but if we think about like Caribbean, like in Haiti example, like when I think about the people that have a bit way more funds and have more money, they only have like 2 or 3 kids. If they're kids outside, we may never know. But a lot of time they're not looking to have more kids because they do understand the costs that come with kids.
So then there needs to be better education around the correlation between sex and economics within the economy, within the community.
Exactly. Like you
Yeah.
both just hit the nail on the head. No, you're touching on class, you're touching on like gender. So like One, definitely, the more well off you are, the less likely you are to have more kids. That is a natural thing. The more, like as we've seen, the more women go to university, the less kids are being born. There's a correlation between that because kids are expensive, and also wealthier people have more access to like birth control. They have access to safer sex supplies. They have access to safer sex education to know that you don't have to have that much kids. um, but rather than people who unfortunately don't have that access, who do not have that education, were gifted or privileged with it, they
Yeah.
Yeah.
just have sex. Like it's not their fault. Like I like, if you don't know or you're not given like the access to condoms, you're not gonna use condoms. Or if it like culturally, it's like hilarious that men always are raw. Like you're always gonna go raw, or like those things. So definitely lower income folks do have more kids. This is very common, especially in more rural places. In the Caribbean, I did definitely see that. Like personally, I did. My great grandmother had 15
Okay,
kids,
yeah. I
not
was gonna be
15,
like,
15. So like
it's
it's
still a
still
lot.
that's a
Yeah.
lot. That's out
Yeah.
of one person, one woman. Like, and that's
Mm.
not her partner.
Mm-hmm.
Her partner had more kids. So like, and like that's always a thing. Like people have like I don't know what you guys call them, but like back home we call them like side man, or like you have a side like he has a side wife or side family or whatever. So like it's a big thing. It's a very common thing. But also as you touch on that, like yes, people can be more educated, but also men have to have the accountability of having safer sex on their part too. May that be, well, there's honestly one real male birth control, which, well, two condoms and vasectomies. They're not really like have pills and IUDs like women are given, but I definitely think that one, more research needs to be done on male birth control because that would stop a lot of babies. Um, but also, yeah, I think men have to have accountability too into like their reproductive health, because not only does like you're reproducing children, but are you taking responsibility for those children that you're having? Like just because you're not giving birth to these kids, are you tied down to this child? Do you get to find like put economic sacrifices and economic, or not only economic but emotional support and all these things into the child, and or can you just get up and go whenever you want and just like maybe pay some child support once in a while, you know? So I think like definitely that conversation of safe sex, we've had it, we always have with women and always have with girls, but we never have enough with boys and teaching boys about sex, because boys often have sex younger than girls do. I think it's very very much younger, and yeah, it's not as hard. If I'm being completely honest, I don't think it's that hard to have that conversation with boys. I think that yeah, and I don't think men technically want to have like 15 kids by accident. Like it's not like always a choice. I hope not a choice. But like if you choose to have 15 kids, a lot of them are accidental or unintentional, and like
Mm-hmm.
that's not good for the man as well. Like now you're a father to like a bunch of kids.
Oh
Like I think
yeah.
of Nick Cannon.
Wow.
It's hilarious. Some people always laugh at it. No, but like for real, like think about it. As a stress as a person, you have like 9 kids. 9 kids in this society, even if you're rich, Nick, it's not that like 9 kids is a lot. And like you have to care for every one of these kids. You have to put emotional and financial support into these kids. Like that's a lot. Like as much as we talk about the woman, like bro, that's a burden you're carrying on yourself. So like we should talk about their reproductive health and rights, because they
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I feel like we live in a society that like we never put the blame on men, especially like around abortion. There's sometimes a lot of rape that do happen, and incest things that happen to you, which, and sometimes you look at the girl, most of the time they look at the girl and they say, okay, you could have closed your legs. They blame us for the clothing. They anyways, but and they just refuse to see either the man that was in power that either rape a kid, in if it's in incest in a household, or either it's like a young boy outside that just couldn't control the urge, or that was angry that they got rejected, because there's many story like that. So I think that it's it they remove the rights of women choosing to either keep the baby or like abort or choose abortion is not that it's unfair, but it's unfair because some women doesn't actually choose to be in that situation. And I don't think that any person that never didn't want to be in that situation should be in any situation. So yeah.
Yeah, definitely.
No, I'm like,
Sorry.
yeah, like
I was
men's
just gonna say,
never.
like, I definitely,
Yeah, that was kind of just a comment to me.
but I definitely agree that, like, it's outside of the irregular abortion talk about just being able to have children if you want to have children or not. But like, just like there's sometimes situations that just happen. Like we can't stop life from happening, and like unfortunately, it just happens. So like sometimes it could be your first time ever having sex, just like everybody else who just first time having sex and you got pregnant. You could have used a condom and you just got pregnant. Like it's not your fault. And like I feel like even though there are special circumstances, and there's a lot of special circumstances. I don't even call, I should call them special at this point because incest, rape, and all these things happen way more than we like to act like it does. Um, yeah, like outside, like those situations, definitely, I feel like those people should not be forced, like literally forced to like
Yeah.
carry violence with them, to be forced to be put in a situation that they don't want to be in, you know. But also like even if you don't want to have a baby, I feel like it's it's so wrong to force somebody to have it. Like even if and like it's and I work it like vice versa. It's like telling somebody who wants a baby that you're not allowed to have a baby. You're never ever gonna have a baby. Like imagine if that was that like that's horrid both ways. And like we shouldn't have to enact on anybody. Nobody should have to be forced to do anything. Like as I'm personally pro-choice and I don't mind whatever anybody else is, but I personally think that like you should have the choice to have a child, not have a child, terminate the pregnancy if you need to, terminate the pregnancy if you don't need to but want to, or whatever the case may be. Like the forcing part, the part where we're like you cannot choose,
I
is
have
the
a
only problem
question,
I have with
and
it.
I might be playing devil's advocate again here. So, for those, because, okay, so you mentioned being pro choice, and for those who might be more on the pro life side, right? And they'll say things like, you know, there's adoption, right? So there are other ways that you can still support the child, I guess, moving forward. But how do you still address that
Yeah.
as if you're somebody who's pro-choice and who would want to still not want to have to carry out that baby full term? Yeah. I don't know if
Yeah,
that's a
definitely.
question or I don't know. Yeah.
I personally, well, when people mention the idea of adoption, like I ask them if they ever adopted yet, because if you've ever even signed up for adoption, you know what the situation is like. It is not an easy process. First of all, one, the foster care system across the world is like condensed with kids. Like there's too much kids in the foster care system. So one, people are utilizing that system. It's not like we're not using it. There are kids in that system. Second of all, people always try to adopt, but you cannot adopt willy nilly. You can't just be a person say, I want a kid, I want them in my house, and we're gonna have kids. Like you have to go. Some people are on adoption care lists for 10 years. 10 years. Imagine you're like, okay, like I don't know, it just doesn't sound correctly to me. Like I feel like you can, yes, you can adopt, you can put that child up for adoption, but one, okay, two things. One, you can put that child up for adoption, yes, go ahead, but that person still is being forced to carry that child full term if they don't choose to. That's not okay. And I feel like that's where the problem is. It's okay that you have our own beliefs and everything, but we shouldn't force anybody to do anything they don't want to do. But second of all, the adoption system is already like overly saturated and is condensed to the point that like we are having problems with it right now, presently, before the abortion ban. So now that you're like our government doesn't have the capacity to take care of all these kids in the system or even process all these kids in the system, like we can't, I feel like it's like how do I say this, we're making rules as if we're a utopia, you know, we're making rules as if we live in the perfect paradise, but we don't. Like the foster care system is not good for kids. Like it is not good. Kids are abused there constantly. Kids are gone missing from the child care system. Kids go through incest in the child care system. Kids get killed in the system. Like kids get trafficked in the system. So it's not like a beautiful place. It's not these kids are going to like a hotel in LA and they're gonna live their life in luxury. They're not. They're going to like like homeless shelters essentially for children, you know. And I feel like as much as I understand the pro life stance, I really do understand it, but I feel like as much as people don't want to be forced to not have a baby or get rid of their children, as people should also give people respect if they choose to, because there are a lot of situations happen. Like I know, I don't know. I had this discussion recently, and I feel like it's so easy to just say like these options, just like yeah, just do this, but like it's not just do this. It's not just like have the baby full term and go to give that baby up for adoption. It's I carried a child full term. I dealt with the social consequences of being pregnant that whole time. I had to take all my checkups. I had to do this. I had to give birth to the child. Very complicated, very, very painful, very intimate experiences. And then on top of giving birth, I have to give it away immediately. That's very complicated. It sounds so easy. It sounds like a checkbox in our head, but as humans, I think we have to take a minute and breathe and like think about like the emotional aspect that ties to this person. Imagine being forced to carry a child full term and you don't want to. There's a kid in I think it's in Mississippi or in Texas, and it's happening right now. She's 10 years old and she's forced to keep her child from her ancestral, like she got pregnant by her dad. 10 years old. No matter what you believe, I don't think there's a point where you should look at that 10-year-old child and tell her to carry that child out and just give it up for adoption. Imagine yourself at 10 years old. And like that's beyond traumatic. And I know I'm using an extreme situation, but just imagine the situation, anything. Imagine somebody putting like you becoming pregnant by accident, on purpose, whatever the case may be, and you are forced to keep that baby, even if you don't want it, no matter what's happening in your life at that point. You could be homeless. A lot of times people are homeless. People can't have enough money to feed themselves. We're in a recession. We're in like a triple recession right now after a pandemic, and you cannot force people to have. We have a breast milk shortage. I mean, not a breast milk shortage, a baby formula shortage across like America. You're forcing people to have kids, and not all people can produce milk and lactate. Not all people could feed their children. So you're essentially telling people if they can't afford to buy baby formula and you can't lactate, that baby gotta starve.
Yeah.
What?
So
like that
I feel like that
sense.
touches on the idea of like when people say you give birth because you're saving a life, but then when the life is in the real world, they're like not protected whatsoever, and the system isn't actually there to support them and to help them in whichever way that they need to be helped. So I I I don't know. That just hit home. Yeah.
Yeah, I think I always like to think of things like in my own shoes, like how would I feel if I was living in their shoes or whatever. Um, yeah, and I can't fathom the idea of like somebody forcing another person to have a child in like circumstances they just don't want. They're not consenting to this. They're not consenting their body to be a part of this process, being forced to do it. And if you don't do it, like in the States right now, you can go to jail. You could face someplace you can face the death penalty. like you're going to jail for something that like. And also, and one of the problematic parts of the States, just a little tangent, is like you can go to jail for having an abortion, or you can you can face life in jail for having an abortion, but they can't tell the difference between an abortion and a miscarriage. So if you go to the hospital and you have a miscarriage and they think you had an abortion, you can go to jail for that. Even if you naturally your body just had a miscarriage, you can. And there are I think I've read like 2 cases this week alone about women going to jail in the US for this, and it's been happening. It's continuing happening. Like this.
Yeah, there was a story. It's like an Instagram post I've been going around. You guys probably like seen it, but the girl, she was pregnant and the baby died inside of her belly, and I think she already had an appointment either before to go through with it, and then eventually when the news happened, they told her that can happen, so they basically forcing her to give birth to
A stillborn. So
that's basically dead inside of her.
so what are the effects of that? Because obviously, if there's no life in your uterus, there's toxins that might be.
There's so many effects of that. Well, it depends on like the stillbirth. I think if nothing had popped, like the amniotic sac didn't pop, if everything's fine inside, you can't carry that baby out. However, essentially you are carrying a corpse. So if that maybe if there's too long of a period, I think there's potential for the baby to rot. I think there's potential for a bacteria to get involved. I think infections, everything, and then also like we downplay what birth is really like, y'all. We really be downplaying what birth is like. Like birth is an intense process. It can like literally kill you. So the amount, and it's also just very emotional and traumatic. Like you're having something coming out of you, like a child that you grew inside of you. So imagine the trauma to have to, like you're 5 months and having to sit till 9 months with a dead baby inside of you, doesn't move, doesn't do anything, you know it's dead. That the psychological effects of that alone, I can't even think about. But there are many other like physical and health effects that can
So
happen.
there's two things that comes in my mind. Okay,
This conversation is gonna go on.
I don't even know how long this conversation been going, but I feel like one is just a comment or I'm just thinking about it, and the other one is actual question. So the first comment, which I feel like the comment can basically turn into a whole conversation, but what I kind of find surprising with a lot of jobs is that most likely in the States, I mean, depending what kind of job you have, they don't give women or men enough of like how do you call that, a maternal leave.
Yeah,
But
parental leave, yeah.
it's kind of crazy that after this high company now that will pay all the costs. If you work for them, they will pay all the costs, which probably gonna cost more than actual give that person a leave. So I know that I almost feel that like even work in a labor type of setting, they value more women without kids, or women that are not pregnant, just how they kind of like not willing to give enough time for parental leave, but they're about to spend XYZ for the person to fly out wherever in order to get a safe abortion. It's not really a question. It's just like, it's just crazy how the society we are, that the labor, even for women that choose to keep a baby, this is like not really abortion, but like for women that choose to keep their baby, they almost have less support based on this conversation that we're having.
I think childcare, like when you do have a child, you are less supported in work. I could definitely see that, because like stereotypes and all those things about like women and mothers in the workplace and all that. But yeah, and also capitalism is not going to thrive off of somebody who is not being able to be there at their beck and call, you know, and who has to like tend to another person, or you know. So I definitely. I don't know a business that does that, but that's wild that the business is doing that. And I feel like it shows their priorities, which is very sad, because I feel like a person who has a child and a person who doesn't have a child should have the equal amount of like rights and like pay and everything. Like I don't understand why there's a difference, but also it's really sad. Like imagine you, like I know when you go on paternal leave or parental leave, like you only get like 60% of your actual salary or something like that. So like just that alone, like,
it's like, how am I supposed to take care of this child?
Yeah. But it depends of where the person work, because some of them is only give 3 months, couple weeks. It's all depends, especially in America. I mean, I feel like in Canada, if you work in like public service, if you're a public servant, you have like it's
like a year off or something like that. Like in Canada, it's a lot more.
Yeah.
You can get a little bit more if you want, but in the US, sometimes it's usually about 3 months.
Exactly.
Like,
and so I know that was one of the conversation that a lot of people like, even like either you're pro-life or pro-choice, it's a conversation like it's kind of curious, because there's a list like Apple does that, Amazon, Tesla, all those big tech companies, they publish it like, hey, like I'll definitely help you fly out and all this. But the question is, women that are currently pregnant right now are forced to return to work and leave their newborn at home.
And essentially, you know what's also that question is, there's no national health child care. Not only just in Canada, in the US. So you're telling these people, after you have your 3-month-old baby, you're supposed to find somewhere for your child to go for daycare all day or whatever it is, pay thousands of dollars. In Ontario, I think the average is like if it's somewhere between 12 to 1,700 a month per kid in daycare. Okay, in Ontario, that's a rent for one child. In the US, it's worse. Okay, in the US, it's like about that or worse. So like I'm saying, you're telling me come back to work after 3 months after just having a child, leave the newborn in a random place with some strangers, and I pay pretty much my half of my salary or more
Yeah.
in childcare just because you want me here.
Yeah.
Like that's
It makes no sense.
It makes no sense.
Yeah.
So I think that's also adds up to many other reason why women choose career over raising. It doesn't, the society doesn't give much support to even women that choose to keep their babies. So I think that there is a lot of work to be done in a lot of work to be done, anything related to birth to reproductive, right? But I do have a question, okay?
And then it's been an hour, so we'll go to the next one.
Okay, and I think that maybe that could be the last question.
After the last one.
Okay, she has a last question. And I know that at the beginning, and I know you do not represent like this conversation is all about your opinion, but there has Planned Parenthood been having some history rumors around the founding of it. And again, you don't need to answer, but in America, we're seeing the trend that most of those abortion clinics tend to be in the minorities communities, because the history was they were kind of trying to wipe out us. So
yeah, eugenics.
Yeah. Again, we don't have to talk too much about it. I just kind of want to know your opinion, especially as a Black woman. Although we live in Canada, but if let's say you were born, you grew up in the United States, and then you would hear all that hey, like, you know, like government has a whole agenda behind like wiping like the black community, especially the last conversation that Trump did, the lady says, oh, like victory for the white race. That was very weird, but again, we don't have to dive in too much into this, but
no, but I want to answer that question a little bit. Not going to talk about like definitely Planned Parenthood because I don't have the aspect of that, but abortion clinics in general, I think it's a very similar situation as like, you know, in like lower income communities, there's never like a real good grocery store. It's always a bunch of like you know, like cash check places where you can pawn your stuff, or you can get like quick cash, or like liquor stores. Those things that are put in the communities to like not uplift them, but like to kind of keep them stagnant. I feel like that's kind of like one of those things. I think that it's two-sided. One, I think they are addressing an issue that was asked for, like, you know, like where we do want to have access and availability of like services like this. Definitely think they should be there and they should be everywhere. But I feel like I get where like the tinge of like, ooh, that doesn't seem too good, you know, like, because it's like it's being put and placed in like lower income and marginalized communities for a reason. Like the government doesn't do stuff for fun. They know exactly what they're doing. And I think that like it is a thing. I think it's a very subtly spoken thing. I don't know if you know too much about the history of eugenics in Canada, but eugenics in Canada is very, even though we want to act like it was so far ago, it was just the other day. Eugenics is like still happening in some places. So like it's a different form of it. Like it's just like a subtle form of saying, here, like control this. It's not like they're putting up like sexual health clinics for you to go get free contraceptives and learn about these things, or like get like prenatal testing or anything like that. It's not that. It's like, here's an abortion clinic. If you would like to access it, go ahead. And I get like, I'm happy that they are in there, but I definitely do get the point of where it's like very off-putting. And it's also like, if you're gonna give me this resources, where are the other resources you could be giving me to? Like, don't just give me an abortion clinic and our school still has like old books that barely holding up, or don't like, you know, things like that.
That's it.
Or like there's not a good grocery store where you can get fresh produce around us, or like, you know, like those kind of things. I feel like, yeah, I don't like it. I feel where it's a little off-putting. Definitely.
Thank you.
Okay.
Miriam, your last question.
Yeah, I think we can end all this conversation. A lot was said here, and I think like I don't know. As a woman, it's hard to have these conversations, and
Yeah.
to see that there's other women who have to go through these things, and it just doesn't sit right with me at all, at
Yeah.
all. And anyways, I would say things, but I don't know if I could say them on the mic. So let me just go to the next question. Okay. So finally, for women who might be having trouble with their own reproductive health, whether it be miscarriages, having trouble with their fertility, like fertility issues. What are some like empowering words like you can leave with them in support of them on their journey, especially with everything going on? Like it might be very triggering for them, right, to know that they can't have access to um, abortion services if they're having a miscarriage. So yeah, what are some thoughts for them?
Mm, my my words of encouragement, as a fellow Black woman, to my other, not even fellow Black woman, just my fellow woman, and but specifically I'm targeting my Black woman. Don't give up. Like honestly, don't give up and don't settle. Like don't take no for an answer. And I'm specifically talking about in terms of like, if you know something is not right, if you feel like something's not right with your body, if you feel like you want something to change, it doesn't matter if it's from an abortion to like you think you have a cyst in your ovaries. If you think there's something going on, don't take no for an answer. I feel like a lot of times doctors, the government, a lot of authority figures don't take us seriously, don't listen to us when we're talking, and I feel like that's how a lot of things go undiscovered, or like just start to create problems. So if you, let's say, are having an issue with your reproductive health and you know it's an issue, when you go to the doctor and they tell you it's nothing, get a second opinion. Go somewhere else. If you have to, it's a hassle. It's tiring, and I'm with you on that because I know how exhausting it can be and how disheartening. But like your health matters more than these people's opinion. Like don't care about these people's opinions. Your health is always going to be more important. So yeah, I think that like never settle, and as easy it is to say but hard to do your research. Do your research on the things that can like benefit you. So if you need to access an abortion clinic, use the services around you. You can always call people like Planned Parenthood, ask them for the nearest abortion clinic, ask them for helps, ask them for options, whatever the case may be. If you don't feel comfortable with them, call a hospital. Don't feel comfortable with them, there are sexual health clinics all across Canada, like the one on Clarence Street in Ottawa, the sexual health clinic. Go there. If like there are so many places, it's just not heard of, but like there's always things to go. And if you still feel discouraged, like you can hit up people like me, who like literally my job, and you can ask me like to find out and help places where you can figure out things for yourself or ask questions, or sometimes you just need to vent and say like these doctors don't listen to me, I hate them all. And like I understand. But yeah, just don't give up. Like it's okay. It's You're not alone for real. Like we're all going through it slow and day by day.
Okay, sorry, I want to add one more to that. Okay, so what about for women who might be experiencing some shame around their reproductive health system? Yeah.
Oh, if you're feeling shame, there's nothing to be ashamed about, first of all. Like, generally, there really is nothing to be ashamed about because even if you think you're the only one, there are so many people going through the same thing. But also, like, there's no shame in being yourself. There's no shame in your experiences. There's no shame in being you. Like shame is a feeling that we all have trouble with, but it's all like natural to all of us. And I there's no shame in your experiences, honestly, especially around reproductive health. If you've accessed an abortion or you need to access an abortion and you feel ashamed about that or telling people about that, don't feel ashamed. But if you don't have anybody to talk to about these things, there are outlets. There are like, again, people like Planned Parenthood where you can literally call and like talk to somebody online for hours. There are women's resource centers. There are just people on Instagram. Like literally hit me up. Like just slid in my DMs and just be like,
She's
girl,
pretty
it's so much
she's
going
pretty
on.
quick at
Like
answering, guys.
like,
So
yeah, I'm really good at answering my instant
She's
replies.
talking from experience.
Or even, but also especially around shame, I think it's really important to find somebody in your community. May it be a doctor, may it be your best friend, may it be your cousin, a stranger on the street, a counselor in a community center. It doesn't matter who it is. Talk to them. Like go and speak and talk about your problems, because it's like, especially if you've recently like had an abortion or know somebody going through abortion, it's very hard psychologically. You may try to act like we're the toughest people in the world, especially Black women. We are strong and independent, but like we don't always have to be. So I feel like really talk to somebody about it, and yeah, there's no shame in your experiences. No one's gonna judge
perfect.
you.
Perfect.
It's natural.
Thank you, Jade. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Yeah.
You're welcome. Thank you. For having
Yes.
me.
This is great. This is a great conversation. Do you want to let people know where they can find you? I know you have your own platform as well, so you can.
Oh
Yeah.
yeah. So my personal Instagram is ohmyjadie, OHMYJADIE, or you can follow me on my intersectional opinion on Instagram. Um, or you can follow me on Spotify. I do podcasts sometimes, little things I like. But nothing as profound as this. I'm very impressed and I love this conversation. But yeah, if you want to find me, DM me.
Well, thank you.
Okay, well, thank you for tuning into this episode. We're very grateful to have been able to have Jade for this conversation. I think it was very enlightening. I think a lot of us who might identify as Black women might also kind of understand this topic a bit more. But for those who might not identify as Black, I'm sure you might also,
Yeah.
well, at least my hope is that you also understand and have some compassion for those who might be struggling with their reproductive health. So on that note,
Yeah. And also disclaimer, this conversation is not pro life or pro choice debate. Although it is our opinion, but I hope that throughout the video you had a chance to learn. And yeah, I really hope that you guys had a active listening and not like, oh, those girls are like pro choice.
I think the goal is really to just have people understand the multiple layers that come with giving birth, and it's really not just the easy, hey, 9 months and let me push out a child. Like there's a lot of mental, economical, physical stresses that just come with birth in general, and it's anyways, I don't want to continue this conversation to do more.
Thank you again. You can follow us it's at _consciously black. And again, my name is Nakalan, and then my co-host
Miriam. So you can also find me at the thoughtful therapist _.
Perfect. So you can like, share, comment, subscribe,
do it all.
And thank you.
Thank you. Have a good one, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.
Are we clapping?
No, we're not. We always clap.
All right.